Hare Krishna. Welcome to the Q&A session of Bhagavad Gita 2021. And we will start with Mangalacharan prayers, and then we will do our Q&A session after I give a quick overview of what we covered yesterday. So let's start with the prayers which are given in the introduction to the Bhagavad Gita. Let me share my screen. Okay, hopefully you can see the screen. Bhagavad Gita introduction. And these are called as the Mangalacharan prayers. These are auspicious prayers that to the Supreme Lord Krishna, to the previous acharyas, that help us to understand Bhagavad Gita better by their blessings. First two verses for Srila Prabhupada, and then the remaining from this introduction. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desha Tarine Om Jnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानु सुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वंशकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिंधुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवास आदि गौर भक्त वृंद। हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Okay, so I want to start with a quick question, quick intro to what we covered yesterday, or a quick overview rather. So let me share again. My screen. So these are sort of the whiteboard pictures of what we covered yesterday. So chapter 3, I gave sort of a overview of the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 3. And the essence of chapter 3 is Karma Yoga. And Karma Yoga, Lord Krishna has already explained Karma Yoga, the pure understanding of Karma Yoga is not Sakama Karma Yoga, but Nishkama Karma Yoga, where one does his duty, but without expectations for the result, or without the expectation to enjoy the results, not without expectation of a result, because when you do some work, result will be produced. It's not like I'm trying to do the work, but I don't want the result itself to be produced. That is not possible. But you're not doing the work for the result that is produced. You give up the results. The results are not mine. So that is Karma Yoga, or Nishkama Karma Yoga. One starts at the level of Sakama, that, okay, I will do it for the results, but I will forego some of the results, and slowly, as a gradual, in a gradual manner, one ascends to the highest level of not desiring any results. However, the entire focus of Bhagavad Gita is not Nishkama Karma Yoga, it is Bhakti Yoga. So that is what I was trying to explain here. And Karma Yoga is being described so that we can understand how to dovetail, how to direct it to Krishna Bhakti. Because in Krishna Bhakti, there is a lot of work anyway. You have to do activity. Activity, Lord Krishna says in the future verses of the 3rd chapter, that you have to do some action, your duty, even to sustain yourself, to maintain your body, to maintain your family. You have to do some work, some duty. You cannot give up duty completely. But the essence of entire Bhagavad Gita is to redirect or to dovetail our duties towards Krishna Bhakti. That we will uncover as we go along the sort of the bulk of the Bhagavad Gita that will come up. So the essence of the 3rd chapter is Nishkama Karma Yoga. However, in Nishkama Karma Yoga, one must do it along with jnana as to why we are doing what we are doing. Just prematurely avoiding karma or avoiding the results of karma without understanding why we are doing it is not very fruitful. It's not very long lasting, because the mind will continue to dwell on it. Externally, if you say, okay, I'm doing my duty, but I give up the results. I'm not interested in the results. I'm not doing it to enjoy the results. But slowly the mind will catch up to it. And therefore, this premature avoidance without training the mind to forego the results, to not do duty for enjoyment of the results is very important. So therefore, karma must be done along with jnana as to why we are avoiding, or not avoiding, but foregoing the results of our duty. So that is the point that Lord Krishna is stressing in this, in the initial part of this chapter. And this starts with a question by Arjuna, asking as to why are you asking me to do this duty, so to say, of fighting the war? If you think that I should avoid the results of the work, or in a certain sense, he's asking, why are you asking me to do this if intelligence is better than fruitive work? Because there will be some output that will be produced. So Lord Krishna goes ahead and explains that you must avoid the results, but with jnana. It is very important to do it, why we are doing it. So I gave the example of, let's say one is doing seva in the temple. He's washing the floor or washing the pots or doing some seva in the temple. One should do the seva, but not so that it feeds one's sense gratification, that, oh, other people are looking at me and thinking, oh, I'm a great devotee, I am doing all this seva. Then it becomes sakama. One is supposed to do the seva with a very, very pure mind, which means when you are doing the seva, it is a nice thing, but also with the understanding, why am I doing it? Not because the other people are looking at me, but because Krishna is looking at me. So that purity of consciousness is equally important to doing the work without expectations or without the desire to enjoy the results. The knowledge of why am I foregoing the desire for expectation of enjoyment is also equally important. So that is what we covered. In the 6th verse of the 3rd chapter, Lord Krishna is explaining how somebody who externally gives up the results, but his mind is still dwelling on those things, is a mithyachari and is a mudha, is a fool and a pretender. Mithyachar means pretender or a cheater. So basically, he is not only trying to cheat others, he is cheating himself. He might as well fully go ahead and do sense gratification. At least you will have the benefit of fully enjoying the senses and getting some temporary pleasure. Sense gratification does give pleasure. Only problem is that it is temporary. So go ahead and at least get some temporary pleasure. Why are you fooling yourself and others, or trying to fool yourself, trying to fool others? by simply pretending externally to give up the results, but mentally you're still salivating. You're still thinking all the time about the enjoyment from the results. And in the 7th verse, Lord Krishna is saying that somebody who is sincerely trying. So there was this concept of, so we talked about concept of fool or a pretender, Vimudhatma and Mithyachari. Then in the 7th verse, Lord Krishna is talking about, even if you do little, but sincerely, genuinely, is much better than doing any kind of karma yoga as a pretense. So the main point is that pretense is highly discouraged. You are just wasting time, fooling yourself, trying to fool others, and trying to fool Krishna. Krishna can never be fooled. He is watching everything. So there is absolutely no point in just, pretending. At least be at a lower level, but be genuine, than trying to be pretending to be at a very advanced level, but being a cheater or a pretender. So that is what Lord Krishna mentioned in the 7th verse. And then in the 8th verse, Lord Krishna is saying that you must do some duty to maintain your body anyway. So trying to give up work itself or trying to pretend that I'm not doing it for any kind of reason is not possible. You have to maintain your body, you have to maintain a family. It's okay that if you are doing your duty and using those results for maintenance of family, maintenance of body. So you are doing some level of utilization of the results. You are not giving up everything, and that's okay. So in the beginning stages, one starts to practice slowly and trying to reduce our attachments, not like a big bang, trying to say that I'm giving up all attachments. Trying to reduce attachments gradually is the main point being stressed. And Lord Krishna finally says in the 9th verse, and we had a long discussion about this, as whatever work you do it as a sacrifice. So sacrifice is very important, that I'm not doing it for myself, I'm doing it for Krishna. So the Sanskrit word uses yagya artha, and tad artham. Yagya, we went into the concept of that one should, yagya means sacrifice. So you sacrifice the result, you're doing the duty, but not enjoying the results. That is sacrifice. You do something, but you don't want to benefit from it. So that is sacrifice. But what is the meaning of the real sacrifice we went into? Real sacrifice means doing it for the other person, not for yourself to enjoy the results, but for someone else to enjoy the results. And that also is not highest level. The highest level, when that someone else is God himself. And we went into the understanding that Lord Krishna is the enjoyer, is the receiver, is the beneficiary of all sacrifices that anybody does. Whether you know it or you don't know it, it doesn't matter. He is the receiver, he is the beneficiary. We looked at two very important verses from Bhagavad Gita 5.29, where Lord Krishna says, Bhoktaram yagya tapasam. All the yagya and tapasa, and again the word yagya is used here, yagya arthat. Lord Krishna says, I am the bhokta, I am the beneficiary of all the yagya and tapasya that anybody does. And then in 9.24, Lord Krishna says more directly, Aham hi sarva yagyanam bhokta cha prabhur evacha. I am the bhokta and the prabhu, the master and the receiver or the beneficiary of sarva yagyanam. Any yagya, any sacrifice that anybody does, ultimately I am the beneficiary of it. And then in the 9th chapter, Lord Krishna very clearly says, therefore do it directly for me. Why you have to take the indirect route? Ultimately, I am the receiver. Come and give it to me instead of giving it to somebody else. And finally, it will come to me. Directly give it to me. Directly make me the object of your sacrifices. So this is the content that we covered in very briefly. I have explained. Now, Lord Krishna from the 9th verse or the 10th verse onwards will explain that you cannot do this. You cannot come to this level overnight. Instantaneously, it is very hard to come to this level of understanding. Therefore, one should go gradually. And in the gradual path, now, mind you, once again, this is the Vedic understanding. In Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna will say, go through the fast track. This is the Vedic understanding. And somebody asked a question, why is Lord Krishna explaining all this if this is not the final instruction? So I will answer that, or I will cover that in just a second. But the longer path is to go gradually, and the gradual way is to worship the demigods, the Devis and Devatas. And that topic I will cover next time in the main class. But the point is that Lord Krishna is explaining that once you start worshipping Devis and Devatas, you get some understanding that there is a superior authority. And finally, you will get the understanding that finally there is no need to go through the indirect route of worshipping the Devis and Devatas. Let us worship directly Bhagavan Krishna or Bhagavan Vishnu. So that is how the Bhagavad Gita develops. And so the next topic is the topic of demigods. So I think I had mentioned that somewhere here, demigods, Devis and Devatas, and who are they? What is their purpose? How should we approach them? All this will be covered in 3.10 to 3.13, these 4 verses. And that's a deep enough topic, or an important topic. A lot of people have questions on this topic. I myself had these questions, 20 years ago, which got clarified after reading Bhagavad Gita. So we will cover this next time. But Lord Krishna is going to explain this in detail, and I will explain it in detail as well. So this is where we stopped, and it is 10:19 right now. So we have 40 minutes for questions. So let us see. So please raise your hands or post your questions in the chat. That way we can pace ourselves properly. So let me paste a question here. Yeah, this question came up yesterday. For some reason, I did not or look at it. I didn't realize this kind of scrolled up in the chat. So thank you for asking it again, making sure I don't forget it. Okay, hopefully all of you can see this question. So the question is, I am confused regarding working without expectation on the result. An analogy for the example, and this is a nice analogy is given here. If a person digs a well, he obviously does it with expectation for water. If the water does not show up for some reason, how can continue digging? How to decide whether to continue or to stop without wasting time? Is the question clear? So a nice question, and it is bringing out an important point. So the question really is, I will try to summarize the question as I understand it, that it is clear that, or the person is confused regarding working without expectation of the result. So you are digging a well and the result is not coming. The result is water. You find water, underground water. So how long should you keep digging or stop digging and then you don't get the result? But the point is that, from this person's standpoint, that, hey, anyway, we were not working for the result anyway. So what's going on here? So that it seems to be some apparent confusion. So let me clarify. This is a very good question, and it brings out an important point. We had said, and Lord Krishna had said, obviously, when we say we, I mean like, the explanation of Bhagavad Gita that we give, and Lord Krishna directly has spoken Bhagavad Gita. He has never said that don't be committed to the result. Whatever now, whether it's digging a well, and I'm not going into the geology aspect of how to dig a well or how to find where is the best probability to find water. All there are methods to do that. Choose a good spot to dig a well, fine. My point is, one must be committed for the result. You cannot do work. Lord Krishna never says do your work in a half-hearted way or abandon it after you don't get the result for some time. The result, you have to be committed in your duty, but be clear that what the work you are doing, you are not going to be doing it for the sake of enjoying the result. So if you are digging the well, it is not because, I will then put a fence around the well, I will sell water and I will become rich. Let's say you are digging it in a desert, and then you will overprice the water, and whoever comes, and then you will tell them, okay, $10 per bottle, and you will enjoy the results of that. That the giving up of the enjoyment of the results is what is Nishkama Karma Yoga. It's not about not being committed to get the result. You do the work, you are committed to getting the result, and then but you're not doing it for enjoying the result. The enjoyment of the result is what is being asked to give up, not the result itself. Absolutely not. When Arjun was fighting the battle or the war, he was fighting to win. Obviously, he was fighting it in a very, very committed way. He was fighting valiantly, but he was fighting valiantly to please Krishna, to follow Krishna's instructions, not so that he can become the king and he can become for some glory that in history books my name will be written as the greatest archer ever that took birth on the planet. Not for any of those reasons. But it does not mean that there was any lack in his commitment to fight very, very bravely to the best of his ability. So I hope this is clarified now.
Excuse me. Thank you very much for this clarification.
Hold on. I just want to, please, 1 second. The person who asked the question, is it clear? I know I can see the person is here.
Yes, I'm clarified. Thank you very much.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Yes, Chitra Mataji. Now you can ask follow up.
Sorry for interrupting before. And my question is, when we do things without any expectation, you gave 2 examples. One is without any expectation you do, and do it for Krishna. And when the other one was, just 1 second, even I am forgetting now. The other one is totally get ourselves detached from the results. Now, to get totally detached from, you gave the example that I will get some big name, my name will be written in the history. My question is here is, when I do a work without any expectation, and I get result or not, whatever it is, as a human being, if anybody praises me, I feel good. That boosts my confidence level. And I would like to have that praised by others, but not to the extent that it should be written on the history chapters or anything. So to expect some amount of appreciation, is that wrong? We are human beings. Without that, how can we motivate ourselves? Where does the motivation come from?
So you are speaking, okay, I'll be a little straightforward here. You are speaking from your past programming, past conditioning of your long life, and potentially many past lives. Okay.
Agreed. That is how.
Let me finish, please. So, I forgot what I was going to say.
I was talking from my past experience, you said.
Yeah. So we don't know how to motivate ourselves unless somebody appreciates us. That is the only source of motivation that we are used to. And if that does not happen, then we lose motivation in doing something. Remember all those conversations that we had about doing your work or doing something and finding the sheer joy in just doing that. We talked about the example of the Guru of Tansen, Haridas ji, of these musicians who just dive into the music when even nobody is looking, And we do not have that experience at all. So please go and listen to those classes again. You will get an understanding of possibly what can be other sources of motivation other than others' appreciation. Having said that, I will say the next point. Okay, so please listen carefully and try to understand instead of, just kind of instantly responding. Try to digest it, try to think about it, try to chew on it. Okay, don't be in a sort of a very reactive mode. Okay, having said this, the other thing is, okay, try to reduce, again, trying to jump overnight from when one is, the only reason why one does things is for sense gratification, whether it be material sense gratification or subtle sense gratification like praise, acknowledgement, recognition. Try to reduce it. If one is doing the duty for physical sense gratification, for something material which you can touch and feel, at least try to come to the level of subtle sense gratification. Okay, so many people, let's say they donate money to the temple. I'm just giving you an example. Okay, so just an example. Whatever example came to my mind, I'm speaking. Donate to the temple. Then they say that, okay, whoever donates over $1,000, we will put his name on the wall. So somebody may say that, okay, I want to donate $1,000, please put my name on the wall. There are other people who say, no, you take $1,000, but please do not put my name on the wall. I do not want to put my name on the wall. We say, okay, fine, that's also acceptable. We will not put it. But in that moment, that person may be feeling, I'm just saying, very happy. See, I did this. I did not want my name to be put on the wall. To himself, he felt proud. Or maybe his friend was standing next to him, or his wife was standing next to him. And he may feel, see, at least they will know how great I am. Do you see? I hope you see the point there. There is still some sense gratification in the second scenario, but it is lesser than the first. So if you are in the first category, at least try to come to the second category. That is progress. In spirituality, we make progress, gradual progress. It's not binary, one or the other. And then the third category, which is the best, will be to not even have that bhavana, that feeling that I want any outcome from this, any sense gratification, even right or left. What you could do, just as an example, which comes to my mind, is take $1,000 cash, not check, not anything. Cash is completely anonymous. Put it in an envelope. When nobody is looking, go and drop it in the hundi. Okay, I'm just giving an example. Whatever the example comes to my mind.
No, I got your point.
Hold on. Please hold on. So try to come to that level is all that is being said. And yes, it involves reducing our hunger, our thirst for getting some kind of recognition from anyone. However, the thirst or the hunger for recognition never goes away. Never goes away. Now here I'm going to the highest principle of Bhakti Yoga. So reducing this thirst or hunger for recognition is human nature, just like you said. Therefore, Lord Krishna has given us the best way, and it happens to be the best way, even higher than the third option. And that is to be hungry for the recognition of Krishna. That kind of hunger is perfectly okay. In fact, it is desired. But no one else other than Krishna. So one should do his duty and try to get the acknowledgement of Krishna. So you go, in this previous example, go to the temple when nobody is looking, but when Krishna is looking, and you drop that cash into the hundi and say that, Krishna, I know you are looking, but I am explicitly requesting you to look at me. See, I am doing this for you. Please accept my humble offering. You are the richest person in the whole universe. This $1,000 will not make any difference whether I give it to you or not. It is anyway yours. I got it from you only, but this is my humble offering of love back to you. Please accept it. In your heart, pray like this and drop it. So when you are able to convert your bhavana, your internal consciousness from that first category through whatever process, through coming to the second category, third category, or directly coming to this fourth category of bhakti, it doesn't matter, whatever path you took, try to come to the fourth category. And what Lord Krishna claims and what all the acharyas claim, coming directly from first to fourth is easier than going through second, third, because then you will get lost. Second, third takes lifetimes. In 7th chapter, Lord Krishna says, Bahunam janmanamante jnanavan mam prapadyate. After many, many lives, you get jnana. This jnana that I should not have any sense gratification. It takes lifetimes. And finally, you come to the stage of bhakti, mam prapadyate. You surrender to me. Why not come there directly? So that is the instruction of Bhagavad Gita. So please try to think about it. And if you have a thoughtful counter question, please say.
I have, but I would not like to say now. I would like to have a discussion. You said there is a separate forum. There I would like to discuss.
So we can set up
Because-
some offline time. Please send me a
Pardon?
WhatsApp. We can set up a one-on-one.
Okay, fine. I will do that on WhatsApp then.
Sure.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Okay. We have another question on the chat. Let me put it here. I am confused with the word jnana of why we are doing karma. This has nothing to do with jnana yoga that we covered in chapter 2, the science of the soul. Absolutely correct. You are 100% correct. The motivation I'm telling you, that why am I doing it? Again, taking that example of donating money to Krishna. But the point is, ultimately, when you start operating from the point of jnana, what the science of the soul is a pretty high level of jnana, but it is in the same textbook, I would say. It is in the same category. What does the science of the soul say, ultimately? That you are not the body. Your original identity is the spirit soul. Why we are hungry for recognition is ultimately for this body, isn't it? Once dies and then you take birth as somebody else. Your name on the wall has been put. What name has been put on the wall? Is it the name of your soul or the name of your body? Today, you may be Birla, Tata, Bill Gates, whatever. Next life, you may be born as a nobody in Africa. Can that person claim, let us say that Mahatma Gandhi, I don't want to again take Mahatma Gandhi, is probably gone back to Krishna because at the time of his death, he took the name of Ram. Let me take some person, I don't know, Einstein. Okay, let's just say his name is there in the Nobel Prize, correct? He got Nobel Prize. Let us say he took birth as somebody else. Can that somebody else claim, I am Einstein, I got the Nobel Prize? What will you say? Get lost. Who are you? Einstein died long back. So the name is associated with the body. Okay? You cannot claim, even though Krishna may know, or maybe somehow for some reason you also know I was this person, you cannot have any claim on it. All the recognition that you are hungry for in this life, all the sense gratification that you want to enjoy is all limited to this body. The only enjoyment that you can get, which transcends the bodies, is spiritual enjoyment. Give me one enjoyment, whoever posted this question, that you can possibly have sense gratification, recognition, acknowledgement, praise, anything that you can take with you to the next life. So ultimately, when you realize that this is so short-lived, let me try for something which is long-term, that is science of soul. Isn't it? So ultimately, it leads to that. When you start realizing, why the hell am I doing this? You donate $1,000 in Portland, your name is on the wall. Then your job or something else causes you to migrate to London, and you start living there. You even forget my name was on the wall in Portland. Somebody will remind you. But at that time, it becomes so important. No, my name must be on the wall. Oh, my spelling is wrong. Please change it. Oh, why did you put my name at the bottom? My name should have been at the top. When people are looking, my name should be visible at the level of the eye. I have heard all these arguments. People are so particular about it. And their children will say, no, don't put just your name, say and sons. अरे आप तो मर जाएंगे, मेरा नाम भी तो आना चाहिए ना, हम तो आपके बाद भी जिएंगे. We will be alive after you die. तो मेरा नाम भी डालो. There is so much desire for recognition for this body, which will not last. That is ultimately, when you start thinking like this is a training. So this jnana is training, ultimately leading to the level of performing activities, doing your duty for the benefit of the soul. Because that is the long-term thinking. We had covered this when we were talking the concept of soul. So many people think short-term. This is just a training to think long-term. And when in this case, long-term means beyond this life. We all know how to think long-term in this life. We all know that, isn't it? That's why we tell our children, padho, likho, bade aadmi bano. So that you will have enjoyment later when you grow old. So you must work hard today. Don't we tell that? Otherwise, what is the problem? Enjoy today, khao, piyo, mast raho. Go eat ice cream, watch TV, play video games. Why do you have to worry about studying hard? It is long-term thinking. So we know how to think long-term, but within the span of this life. Bhagavad Gita is teaching us to think long-term across lifetimes. In that matter, we are all short-sighted. Just like somebody who is just watching TV all day, eating ice cream, playing video games. Wouldn't you tell that child, "Arey bhaiya, kuch padh lo? Otherwise you will fail." So when you can give that advice to somebody else, apply it to yourself. And that is jnana. And that is how it connects to the science of the soul. Okay, so I hope I have answered that question. Can you please, do you have any follow-up? Whoever asked that? Is your question answered?
Yes, thank you. I asked that. Thank you very much.
All right, very good. Any other question?
Gopiji,
Yes.
what is the difference between the jnana and the jnana yoga?
Aha, very nice question. Jnana and Jnana Yoga. So, in the 7th chapter, Lord Krishna talks about two kinds of, so I'm giving a little bit longer answer. So because we have time, if others have questions, please post your question, raise your hand, etc. And then I can, modulate myself. But since there may not be any other question that I'm seeing, I'm going to take longer to answer this one in a more contextual manner. So the question is, what is the difference between Jnana and Jnana Yoga? So the word yoga is the difference. Okay. In any case, the longer understanding is, so in 7th chapter, I hope you are seeing this, still seeing the screen sharing. There are two verses where Lord Krishna is describing two types of, I don't know why this is not loading, two types of elements in this universe. One is the material elements and one is the spiritual elements. These material elements are Bhumir, Aap, Anala, Vayu, Kha, Man, Buddhir, Evacha, Ahankara, Iti, Yamme, Bhinna, Prakritir, Ashtadha. These are the 8 material elements, Prakriti elements. Prakriti means material nature. So Bhinna, Prakritir, Ashta. Ashta means 8 elements. What are they? Bhumir, Aap, Anala, Vayu, Kha, Man, Buddhi, Ahankara. Then in the next verse, Lord Krishna says, beyond this, there is a spiritual element. Apareyam itas anyam. Other than this, there is these apara. Apara means lower. Para means higher. Para. Parlok chale gaye bolte hain. Parlok chale gaye. Parlok se dhar gaye. Parlok means he has gone to the higher world. So para means higher. Apara means lower. So these 8 are the lower elements. And what is the higher element? Jiva bhutam mahabaho. The jiva, the soul, is the higher element. And everything in the next verse, Lord Krishna says, everything in this universe is created from these two. All created beings, I'll just read the English, have their source in these two natures. The para and apara, which means material elements, which further are categorized as 8: earth, water, air, fire, ether, mind, intelligence, and ahankar, or ego, false ego, right? And then the spiritual, the jiva, the spirit soul. So these are the 9 total elements being described in the Bhagavad Gita. Okay, so now when we say jnana, okay, jnana typically means the understanding of the 8 material elements. That is jnana. So all the scientists are jnanis. No scientist, is there any department of soul in any university you have seen? No university has department of spiritual science or soul. They may have department of religion, but that is about reading religious books. It is more from a philosophy standpoint. But there is no research, there is no active science of spiritual element in the same way as for physical elements. Physical elements, there's so much science. So that is jnana. But when we start connecting that to the spiritual element, that becomes jnana yoga. Because God is spiritual. We have a tiny spark in our body, the soul. That is very tiny. We had studied in 2nd chapter, it is the size of the soul is 1/10,000th the tip of a hair. Such a small spiritual element, which is giving us the whole energy, the whole consciousness, chetana. That is what is keeping us alive. When body dies, everything is still there. The blood is there, the heart is there, the brain is there, everything is there. Bones are there. What leaves the body is the soul. And therefore you see it as dead. Acheta means it is dead. There is no chetana, no consciousness. So when you start studying that spirit soul, and Bhagavan is all spirit, there is no matter. Bhagavan's body is, Bhagavan has a body, but he doesn't have a body made out of the 8 elements. His entire body is spiritual. Whole body is spiritual, made of the para element. So when we start studying that para element, the spirit soul, that becomes jnana yoga, because we are taking the jnana and connecting. Yoga means to connect it to the spiritual side. So that becomes jnana yoga. So as long as you are just a scientist, you are doing jnana. Yes, fine. That is all jnana. Any knowledge is jnana. But if it is not connected to spiritual understanding, you cannot call it jnana yoga. Therefore, jnana yoga is knowledge that is in the direction of trying to understand what is the spiritual element. And that is why it is called Jnana Yoga, which was covered in 2nd chapter, those 20 verses where Lord Krishna talks about the spirit soul. And that is why it is Jnana Yoga or Atma Yoga or Sankhya Yoga. It is the science of matter and spirit, both. And to realize that the spiritual element is higher, the material element is lower, because material element is temporary. It disintegrates. The spiritual element never disintegrates. All that was covered in the 2nd chapter. Nothing can destroy it. Water cannot wet it. Fire cannot burn it. All those things we discussed. It remains, it is eternal. It is always pure. Matter does not have that property. It does not have that property. You go to any monument, go to Egypt, pyramids, They are considered to be the oldest structures on the planet, correct? Oldest man-made structures. Have they become better over time or have they become worse over time? Tell me. By nature, matter integrates or disintegrates. Which one? By nature. Matter disintegrates, isn't it? Even physicists say that after some trillions of years, the whole universe will disintegrate. There will just be energy. At a very low level, there will be energy in the universe. That will be, they say, one of the theories is that all the matter in the universe will disintegrate and become just energy, and that is how the universe will die. You can read on internet of the theories of the future of the universe. So at the highest level, today science even says that the matter, all the matter that we see around us will disintegrate. Okay? So the very nature of matter is to disintegrate, and therefore it is temporary. It is temporary, like a little toy. You must have had a toy when you were young. Do you know where the toy is today? You don't care. It is broken. It has been thrown away into the trash. It is temporary. Matter is temporary. Okay? Therefore, studying matter or studying this temporary understanding is temporary. Jnana Yoga, the real Jnana Yoga, is connecting with, or the knowledge or the science of that eternal element, which is spiritual element. All right. So I gave a longer answer. I hope it satisfied your question or query.
What I wanted to make it sure, jnana is a knowledge, a general knowledge, and jnana yoga is a knowledge about the spirit or atma. Am I right?
Jnana can also be about the Atma, but then it becomes Jnana Yoga. I don't mean to say that Jnana just means about temporary. Jnana is Jnana, knowledge.
Yes.
Jnana about, you can say, Jnana about, I don't know, Jnana about math could be, Ganit Jnana.
Yeah.
Chemistry could be Rasayana Jnana or whatever.
Yeah.
But Jnana Yoga means
It's a knowledge about the
knowledge about
atma.
about the spiritual element, yes, and everything connected to the spiritual element. Ultimately, it is about Jnana, about Bhagavan, because Bhagavan is all spiritual. So that is definitely the highest level of Jnana Yoga, is to understand Bhagavan. And we will see that in chapter 4, which is called Jnana Yoga. The name of chapter 4 is Jnana Yoga, and there Lord Krishna says that one who understands knowledge about me, janma karma cha me divyam evam yoveti tattvataha tyaktva deham punarjanma naiti. So Mam Arjuna. So this tattvataha, who in essence, tattva means in essence, understands the jnana about me, janma karma cha me divyam. Let me show you 4 point. It is 4.9. Very, very important verse. Janma karma cha me divyam. Me is the important word. My, Lord Krishna is saying, jisko mera jnana hai, one who has knowledge about me. Veti. Veti means knowledge. The Ve is the root word of Vedas. Ve means knowledge. So one who knows Veti in tattvataha, in essence, knowledge about me, about my janma, about my karma, about the activities of me, Bhagavan, which are divya, divyam. What happens to him? Tyaktva deham punarjanma naiti. After he quits this body, tyaktva means to quit, deham, after you die, no more birth. Punarjanma naiti, which means you attain moksha by this jnana about Bhagavan. Do you understand? So yes, that is the highest level of jnana. And that is Jnana Yoga. And this is in the chapter called Jnana Yoga. This is 4.9. The title of chapter 4 is Jnana Yoga, Transcendental Knowledge. Not just knowledge, not just Jnana, Jnana Yoga, Transcendental Knowledge. Knowledge that transcends matter. ठीक है? समझ में आ रहा है?
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else we have?
Prabhuji, I have a question. Can I ask related to this Jnana Yoga?
Yes, please.
So chapter 4 is transcendental knowledge, Jnana Yoga, and also the last part of Bhagavad Gita, chapters 13 to 18 is also called Jnana Yoga. But what is the difference actually? Is it more in detail or what is it? Can
Yes,
you explain?
those are, yes, definitely. Those are the topics Lord Krishna is describing in detail, all the aspects of Jnana Yoga. And I know you have undergone Bhagavad Gita fully. You will see that 13th chapter, for example, is just a very detailed expansion of the science of the soul. And in the second chapter, we discussed many times today also, referenced the second chapter, Science of Soul. The concept of Paramatma has not come up yet because Lord Krishna has not introduced Paramatma yet. He has just introduced Jivatma so far, because we all understand Jivatma. We have seen living bodies, we have seen dead bodies. So, and they both are same. We know living body and dead body, there is not much difference. I mean, like if you analyze it, it has everything. Nothing really changes between living body and dead body other than the consciousness. We all have seen that. So it is easier to understand that something changes between living and dead, and that is the soul. So Bhagavad Gita is building up the knowledge up to bhakti, and in the second chapter, Lord Krishna has not yet introduced Paramatma, but he introduces that concept very strongly. In the first few verses itself, he introduces the concept of that there are two types of knowers in the body, not just one. One is the Jivatma and one is the Paramatma. He says in the very first verses, there are two types of Kshetragya. Kshetra means the body. Kshetragya means the knower of the body. And there are two of them. Why two? Because there is Jivatma and Paramatma. So that concept has been matured. So my point is that 13th chapter is a more detailed and a more deeper understanding of the initial knowledge that we got in second chapter. In the same way, I can go through each of the chapters and they're all about Jnana. 15th chapter is describing how the Bhagavad Gita in essence has the same Jnana as the Vedas. If anybody asks you, what is the highest Jnana present in the Vedic scriptures? Answer is Vedas. And 15th chapter, the essence of 15th chapter, Lord Krishna is saying is that the conclusion, the key message of Vedas and Bhagavad Gita is the same. So that is about Jnana. Similarly, all the other chapters, there is 3 modes of material nature. There is the discussion of the qualities of a person. What are the qualities? The divine and demoniac qualities, the Daivik and Asuric qualities, and so on.
Okay, Prabhuji, thank you.
Strong discussion of Shastra Jnana. In the end of 16th chapter, Lord Krishna is focusing on the fact that if one has to attain Jnana, it has to be through Shastra Vidhim. One who gives up Shastra Vidhim Utsrijya. Utsrijya means to give up. Then na sukham na param gatim. He neither gets happiness nor. So Lord Krishna is talking about Shastra Vidhi in chapter 16 in the last verse. Shastra Vidhim Utsrijya. Yaha Shastra Vidhim Utsrijya na sukham na param gatim. कुछ नहीं मिलता है उसको, न सुख मिलता है, न परम गति मिलती है. So Shastra Vidhi, one has to focus on the Shastra, which are the body of knowledge. So yes, it is a detailed expansion on Jnana Yoga.
All right. Thank you very much, Prabhuji.
However, the last part of 18th chapter is the conclusion of Bhagavad Gita. So, it may very well have been broken down into 2 chapters, 18th chapter. Up to verse number 48 is the Jnana Yoga part. 49th verse is the bridge. And from 50 to 78 is the conclusion of Bhagavad Gita. So 18th chapter, we call it typically as 18a and 18b. 1 to 48 is the 18a. 49th is the bridge, sort of transition. 49 and 50, typically 2 verses, 1 or 2 verses are considered as transition. And then 51 to 78 is 18b. So that 18b is conclusion. It is not technically part of Jnana Yoga. Okay. If there are no more questions, are there any other questions?
Yeah, Prabhuji, Prabhuji,
Yes.
yeah, I want, this just you mentioned, just I wanted to make it clear, the Paramatma is living in all living things and non-living things.
Yes.
Is Paramatma is living inside the Atma or apart from the Atma?
Apart from the Atma. Again, inside, apart, these are spiritual topics. Inside, outside are all material level things. Okay. So you are probably sitting inside your house, correct? So house is material, your body is material. So inside, outside are adjectives, you call it, or whatever you call it, attributes or whatever, to material things. At spiritual level, there is nothing inside and outside. It's hard to explain. Again, I am also, I don't know what are the correct words to use. But Lord Krishna, and in the Srimad Bhagavatam, it has been explained that there are two Atmas in the body. And we had detailed discussion about this in previous classes about the two birds.
Yes.
The body is like the tree, and there are two birds that are sitting. One is busy, is eating the fruits, enjoying the fruits, not looking at his friend. And the other bird, who is a friend of this bird, is trying to talk to it, trying to make friendship, trying to, or rather revive the friendship, and trying to give it good advice. But this other bird is busy eating the fruits. So the one who is eating the fruits is the Jivatma, and the one who is trying to be the friend, trying to revive the friendship, is the Paramatma. So they are sitting next to each other. Now I don't know inside, outside, whatever, but yeah, there are two Atmas.
So Paramatma is not part of the Atma.
No.
Okay. So and also, in my body there are a lot of other things, micro organs are there. So each one will having an Atma.
Paramatma. Yes, but the Paramatma of your own body is the one that is giving you the advice.
Oh,
See, Paramatma just sitting there is not a good. What would you do with that? Or there is no use, or there is no access. If there is a Paramatma in the body of some bacteria in your body, okay, that Paramatma is trying to tell that bacteria what to do. There is the Paramatma in your body, which is telling your soul what to do, what should you do, etc., etc. That is the Paramatma. That is the Paramatma in your body. There are other organisms, yes, living inside your body, even outside your body. On the skin also, there are so many living entities.
yes.
If you look with a microscope, you will, I'm told, I have not looked, but on the skin, you will see thousands of little organisms.
Okay. Thank you.
There is a question on the chat which says, Lord asks Arjuna to go beyond the Vedas. Is there a conflict? No, there is no conflict. So somewhere Lord asks. So yes, it is in second chapter. We had covered this, I think, I don't remember when. A couple of classes ago, we covered that Lord says that men of small intelligence are very much attached to the flowery language of the Vedas. But there is no conflict, because Lord says that, and here also he says Vedas deal with the subject of the Vedas of the three modes of material nature. We had talked about this, which means Vedas, large part of the Vedas is Jnana. Vedas also give Jnana. And not only Jnana like you study in the university, but Jnana within the material world, as to higher planets, but within the material world, how to go to Swarga and enjoy. That is also Jnana. Today, our modern science has not reached that level. They are trying to reach, but they have not reached. How to have a long life, free of diseases. That is Swargaloka life. So all the scientists are trying to go there. Isn't science trying to find out how to live a completely disease-free life? I subscribe to Nature magazine. It's considered the most advanced science magazine. 90% of my interest is physics. Out of the 20 or 30 articles that are published in Nature, 1 or 2 are dealing with physics. 25 are dealing with medicine. Because who cares as to how the universe was formed? First treat my cancer. First treat my diabetes. Everything is about my body, my body. To hell with universe and, how did, what happened in the Big Bang and gravitational waves and this and that and Einstein equals MC square. Who cares? 99% funding from the NSF, National Science Foundation, which is the biggest funding of science in the United States, goes towards medicine. Why is that? Because public wants first their own sense gratification. So Vedas also tell a higher level of sense gratification, how to go to Swarga, which is disease-free completely. So Vedas talk about this, but Lord Krishna says, become transcendental to these. And then in 46th verse, we had covered this. This is the last part of that Vedic part. And then 47th is the Karmanyevadhikaraste, where Nishkama Karma Yoga starts. And what does Lord Krishna say here? All purposes served by a small well can at once be served by the great reservoir of water. So what Lord Krishna is saying, the essence is water in the well and as well as in the ocean. Bhagavad Gita gives you the essence of the Vedas. No need to go through the long thousands and thousands and thousands of pages of Vedas. The essence is the same. So therefore, there is no conflict. The end destination is the same. Somewhere in the purport, Srila Prabhupada says, either you can take, if you have to climb the 80-story building, you can either take elevator or you can take the staircase. Vedas are telling you to go through the staircase. Halfway only you will die. Next life you have to continue. If you take the elevator, you can reach in no time. But the destination is the same. Therefore, there is no conflict in that sense. All right. I hope I answered the question. Does that make sense? Does the answer make sense? Okay, hopefully it does to whoever asked. Thank you very much. So we will stop here. We are 5 minutes beyond the time. So thank you for joining, for the wonderful questions that you asked. Please join us. Now, next time, next week, we will have in the main class, we will not have a regular class. Very senior sannyasi within ISKCON, His Holiness Romapad Swami, is going to be giving a special session. So once in the batch, I invite him to kind of share some of his things, his ideas. He has been, preaching the knowledge of Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam for almost his entire life. He is a disciple of Srila Prabhupada, who is the founder Acharya of ISKCON. And Romapad Swami is a sannyasi. He took to this full-time preaching of Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam at a very early age. And since last 50 years, he has been just spreading that message. So it's very nice to hear from such realized souls, from those who have spent their entire life exclusively for the mission of Lord Krishna. So that opportunity will be there. And then we will still have our Q&A session on next Saturday morning, based on my time, which is probably Saturday evening in India. So in any case, we will have those sessions next week. Thank you so much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Thank you.